Hi, this is Michael P. Coleman, Content Director for Brother Be Well. Thanking you for checking out this series, this trauma and healing series brought to you by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative. Hi, I'm Michael P. Coleman, Content Director for Brother Be Well. Today, in one of a series of Brother Be Well conversations on trauma and healing, made possible by the support of Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative, we're talking about art therapy. Creative expression via art is a proven means to recover and heal from trauma. According to the American Art Therapy Association, art therapy is a kind of intervention that integrates mental health and human services by using active art making, creative process, applied psychological theory, and human experience. Helping us dissect art therapy and understand what it's all about, including how it can help one heal from trauma, is Medea Giddings. She's an associate marriage and family therapist and provisional registered art therapist with one of our partner organizations, HearU.org. Medea, welcome back to Brother Be Well.
Hey, it's so nice to be back, and it's honestly like a huge honor to be invited to talk about art therapy. And, just to give a little introduction about myself, which you've already done so beautifully, is that I am an associate marriage and family therapist, an associate professional clinical counselor, but I am also a provisional registered art therapist. And I do a little bit of niche work, which we can definitely talk about later, is that I utilize video games and digital tools when I do my art therapy. And so we can definitely talk about it a little bit more later.
I can't wait to talk about that a little bit more later. And I said, welcome you back because you've done a couple of already. We call them selfie videos, phenomenal selfie videos for us, Medea.
Thank you. I was definitely nervous while doing them, so that's a little booster to myself that they were enjoyed. And I hope
I,
that a lot of individuals got really good information from them.
I'm sure they did. I'm one of those individuals, and you never would have known you're nervous. You did a great job. So let's get right into this if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Why don't you, for us, define art therapy? Some people may not know what it is. We know what art is and we know what therapy is, but how would you describe the two? What is art therapy?
So the way that I describe art therapy, I think, to my clients, and this will probably be the easiest way, is that it's going to be a process-oriented way of working using line, shape, and color. And depending on what our end goal is for that day, or depending on what you bring into the session, will really decide on whether we're going to do something more process or product oriented. And so the type of art that we engage in session is always going to be different. I am not expecting the client to be Picasso. Um, Even if you do stick figures or if you don't know how to do anything but a scribble, then art therapy can be something for you. Um, yeah, that's it.
That's really a good way to think about it. It's funny you mentioned Picasso because one of my jokes for later was going to be, I am no Van Gogh. I was ready to say that to you, but I can't wait to talk about a little bit later how art therapy can be employed by someone who's not necessarily too terribly artistic. So appreciate that. Can you talk about, if you would, as an associate marriage and family therapist, what are some of the mental health conditions that stem from trauma and have been successfully treated with art therapy? And then, drilling down just a little bit deeper, why would one want to use art therapy in the treatment of trauma?
Right. So I do want to be a little bit cautious when we use the word successfully, just because there is, and I'll talk about this a little bit, but there is a little bit of stigma in terms of art therapy in the research world. But some mental health conditions that art therapy has been proven to work in is, the anxiety disorders, depression, PTSD, um, things that come of that, the misuse of alcohol or drugs. Those have all been documented as being improved upon, or at least have successful treatment goals in by utilizing art therapy. In terms of, so going back to the successful piece, art therapy is very subjective. It's art. So despite there being a lot of studies written up, it's a lot of qualitative research, which is not as favored upon in the scientific community as if it was quantitative. But if a client feels better and has a better quality of life after utilizing art therapy, then I would say that it's been successful. And I'm just going to roll right into the other question you had, which was
Mhm.
the art therapy and the treatment of trauma, which is we have to use other modalities when we're treating trauma. We cannot just do talk therapy. You know, in The Body Keeps the Score, they reference that the body holds trauma in a lot of different places. So we don't just want to talk about it because it's not just in our head. And that is like a really beautiful piece about art therapy is that it can reach into this unconscious language so that we can process it without having to talk about it.
Really a beautiful way to put it. Processing sometimes is very difficult. I have suffered from trauma, especially as a child, and it's sometimes for a kid, is we'll talk about this a little bit later, tough to talk
Mhm.
about, even for adults. And so art can be a different outlet for that.
Yes,
Real-
absolutely.
For someone who's not the most artistic of people, I was joking about not being Van Gogh. How exactly does the creation of art, under the supervision, of course, of a clinician like yourself, how does the creation of art help treat the trauma? How do we get at that?
So, when treating trauma in an art therapy space, we actually, hopefully, it's not always, we'll get to know a little bit about the background of the client before they come in, and that helps us prepare a space and materials for what kind of trauma may be coming through the door. So, as an art therapist, we learn something called the expressive arts continuum, and that really helps art therapists to be trained in what materials may benefit or harm a client in use, because we never want to provide inappropriate materials to the client that could trigger negative feelings. So, especially when we know someone with trauma is coming in, we do things that are going to provide containment. So, we'll use smaller sheets of paper, we'll use 2D products. Like a huge no no, and you see this in the difference for people who are trained or not, is we would never use paint. It's just too emotional. And especially say if an individual came in and their trauma was around harm in any matter, then we definitely wouldn't use red paint. It's a very open processing of trauma. And so art therapy under a trained supervision really takes into consideration how can we help continue and let you move this trauma in a healing manner.
Forgive me, did you just say that the color red is helpful in the treatment of trauma?
Not helpful.
Not helpful, not
Right.
helpful.
So not at the beginning. I would never
Got it.
use that at the beginning.
Got it, got it. That it took me a good several decades to paint this off as red because I learned earlier that that was not necessarily the way to go when I was being treated. But once I was over it,
Mhm.
it's my favorite color, so it's a way to go. Thank you for clarifying that. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. For a lot of people, the creation of art is a very personal activity, and a lot of people I know anyway think of it as a solitary activity. I'm wondering how an art therapist interacts with a consumer during that art therapy session. Can you describe a typical session? I just like that term. There's probably not a typical session, but can you take us inside of an art therapy session?
Oh man, there is no typical session. I have left sessions completely covered in paint or messy, and other times we do not use art at all. But when we do, typically it could look like either the client is doing art on their own, other times they will be working on something and I will be working on something separately. And there are also times when we do something together. I know for the younger clients, there have even been times where we get very active in our making of artwork. Um, and a lot of our clients really appreciate that, but we also have to be able to identify when is the art not right for them. So that's something that's really important about when you meet with an art therapist is that we also have psychotherapy practices, right? So we can understand if someone poses resistances to that, and we can either change out the material so it's something more fluid with them for insight, or we know when to just stop with that.
Really appreciate you sharing. I understand that platforms used during art therapy sessions can include a variety of things: sculpting, painting, drawing, collages even. I'm wondering about your individual practice. Do you employ writing as a creative medium during art therapy sessions? I'm in my heart of hearts, I'm a writer, and it's very therapeutic for me. I'm wondering, as I thought about that, how do you work to match the consumer with the medium that's more comfortable for him or her, more natural for that person?
So with my clients, especially with the younger ones, when I am meeting with parents, I will ask them if the client does artwork and what does that look like? Are they doing coloring books? Are they painting? So on and so forth. For me, another question I ask is if they also play video games. So if a client, plays Minecraft, if they do Roblox, I'm also able to bring a therapeutic space into that game from them and also do creative experiences such as creating the family home, or even doing some different role playing within those games. In terms of creative writing, that's actually something we utilize a lot. We do, I call it brain dumping, where I'll have the client do, just a scribble, or I give them a feeling. I want them to just draw something from it, no directive. And then afterwards, when they've gotten that feeling out onto a 3D space, I have them do stream of consciousness writing, the brain dumping, and they'll just go and go and go. And from there comes the psychotherapy part where we pull out these similar themes that kept popping up. And then that can be translated into a directive, or that can go into, metaphorical work or whatever their treatment goal might be.
That's so fascinating, Medea. It really is, and something that you mentioned that either I can't remember now if it's during this conversation or when we talked last week to get ready for this, that there's some questions in the industry about art therapy. It's really a fascinating modality, and I think something that's more than worth being explored.
Yeah, and I something that's really important to know is that the like you mentioned, the sculpting, painting, drawing, collaging, yes, that is art and that's very traditional, but art is so fluid and open. It can literally be anything. I've had clients make sculptures with shoes, right? Like because we don't have or they don't have any of the materials that are traditional to them. I've had them use receipts that parents have left out. It's really whatever is available to the client, we will find a way to put that creative energy into it and utilize it.
Wow, it's amazing, amazing.